and Chief Operating Officer, Bentall Kennedy, Canada, Remco Daal.
Good afternoon, everyone. As a Vancouver resident and part of a company that was born here over a century ago, I'm absolutely thrilled to welcome you all to Vancouver. It's great to have you here. We're extremely proud that ULI chose one of the most beautiful cities in the world to host its spring meeting. As you can see, just outside these doors, life in this city owes much to the natural splendor that defines British Columbia and the Pacific Northwest, and on a day like today, it all happens. That said, life in this city also owes much to the foresight, the fortitude, and the fierce commitment to urban innovation demonstrated by people like our mayor. Gregor Robertson was elected mayor of Vancouver in November of 2008. He was re-elected in 2011. For the past 6 years, Mayor Robertson has worked hard to address housing affordability, has made significant strides in addressing homelessness, and has been focused on improving public transit. He's also worked hard to attract investment from around the globe, and he is dedicated to making Vancouver one of the greenest cities anywhere on the planet. As a business leader, Mayor Robertson spearheaded the creation of Vancouver's first comprehensive economic action strategy. He is committed to growing a sustainable and thriving economy, an economy that's driven by high-growth sectors, digital media, clean technology, renewable energy, an economy that embraces both innovation and entrepreneurship. Under his leadership, Vancouver continues to rank as one of the most livable cities anywhere in the world, and also a city that continues to attract new jobs and new investment. This afternoon, the mayor will share his thoughts on what makes Vancouver a special place for people and a great place for business. Joining in this conversation with the mayor will be Emmy Award-winning television news anchor Chris Gailus. Chris is host of Global BC's NewsHour, a winner of back-to-back Gemini Awards as the best large market newscast. He has covered major stories in both the US and Canada, and he has worked in New York, Dallas, and Calgary prior to his work here in Vancouver. Together, our opening speakers will tell Vancouver's story, the story of a globally competitive city today, and the story of a city that will be a compelling investment destination for decades to come. Ladies and gentlemen, please join me in welcoming Mayor Robertson and Chris Gailus.
Thank you, Remco. Thank you very much, and thank you for being here, delegates. It was one thing neither Alan or Remco mentioned, but we should tell you the weather is like this every day in Vancouver. Never changes. It's perfect. And congratulations to you, Mayor, for accepting that award.
Thank you.
I think a lot of people who are both visitors and residents are thankful for the kind of environment we have to live in. And as a two-term mayor, and I know now going for a third, you want to see that continue as well. So with the framework that's been set up by Remco there, let's talk about really what makes Vancouver the kind of city that it is. The livability always comes up in the best of lists. Vancouver's seen some immense growth over the past several years. What is it that sustains that?
That's a great question, and first let me welcome everyone to Vancouver. Usually it's my honor and privilege to be able to welcome people from all over the world to Vancouver. We have people from all cultures here in Vancouver, but we welcome many visitors every day here in Vancouver, and wonderful to have ULI here in our city. It's a real honor to be receiving that award for the work that we did in what was brownfield industrial land, quite toxic industrial land for generations, which has been transformed into a great neighborhood and public space. So it's great to appreciate the honor and appreciate you all being here. And really, it is the people that make a city what it is. We benefit from extraordinary surroundings, which on days like today are breathtaking. But Vancouver has attracted people from all over the world, and a very intriguing mix, about now 50-50 European and Asian heritage. We are now the most Asian city per capita outside of Asia, And there's a real balance and an interesting mix of people that also means we have extraordinary talent. It drives our economy. It means we have amazing array of entrepreneurs in Vancouver, and that then attracts more investment and more talent. So combination of great surroundings, great people, and I think over the years some really groundbreaking urban planning. We've, as a city, the planning's been very well done, and it is planning, I think, that respects the environment around. It's tough to compete with an environment like this, but I think city planners, architects, construction industry, you look across the board, people have built a great city here, and that continues to draw more people.
If you could pick out one or two things, maybe even during your tenure, as people sort of go out, walk around, and experience the city on foot, what are some of the things that you would say are the standout moves that have been made from a municipal point of view? What are you most proud of?
I would say the combination of a dense, livable downtown, which most of North America veered away from generations ago. You don't see this kind of density with residents living downtown and anywhere else, but really New York City is the comparable on the East Coast. Vancouver has an extraordinary downtown, with very vibrant, and I think you'll see this as you walk around the city. Whichever direction you go from here, you can't go north because you'll fall in the water. But the downtown is definitely worth exploring, all the little pockets, and noting how the urban form really embraces people, both working and living and recreating. And when I speak, the recreation is the other side of it. Having Stanley Park, a decision that was made, was the first decision made by Vancouver City Council 128 years ago, was to ask the federal government for Stanley Park to be protected, which is an extraordinary place. You can walk out the door here and walk all the way around the seawall of Stanley Park. You can go through the middle of Stanley Park, which has 500 to 800-year-old trees, old-growth forest. You can carry on around the seawall, and we're now finishing the last gap in what is a 28-kilometer walk, seaside walk, mostly seawall right on the water, and be separated from traffic, walking and biking and rollerblading. And that's a very unusual accomplishment that happened over 128 years of successive mayors and council putting together the pieces of the seawall and the seaside route.
Proximity and access to the water obviously are things that a lot of British Columbians, specifically people in Vancouver, North Vancouver, and West Vancouver are happy to experience. One of the defining moments in at least the modern history of the city of Vancouver was in 2010 when we hosted the Winter Olympics. What do you think were the winning attributes that allowed Vancouver not just to win the right to host the games, but then to shine when we did?
The 2010 games, we were the first big city to host the Winter Olympics. Typically it's in a ski town up in the mountains. So it was a change of pace for the International Olympic Committee to choose Vancouver. I think the bid was really on that combination of being able to host Olympics in a vibrant downtown that's adjacent to beautiful mountains. And we have great winter sports facilities. We have a city that loves winter sports. And so again, it comes back to the people that love to host big events, people that love to celebrate, particularly when our hockey team wins in the final against our neighbors to the south. And we took advantage of the games to build the Canada line from the airport to downtown, which has been an incredibly successful piece of rapid transit infrastructure north-south. That enabled a real transformation in terms of the transportation network for the games. So we didn't have traffic. Most people chose transit, walking, and biking during the games, and the roads were relatively empty. And actually that shift continued after the games. We've seen a real shift out of cars in Vancouver for over 20 years now, year by year. And the Olympics was a nice boost for that initiative. And I think our infrastructure benefited generally. We upgraded community center facilities, rinks, some of our big arenas and stadiums. We've had a big investment in all of the facilities that get used every day pretty much in Vancouver, thanks to the Olympic investment.
We talk about the livability and all of the things that make this a great city to walk around in and to live in. and yet Vancouver is still not considered a headquarters city. What kind of opportunities exist, particularly for maybe US-based businesses or others from around the world to come here and center their business here?
Well, Vancouver's value proposition, I mean, there's a combination of the geography being right on the edge of North America and Asia. We have the Pacific Gateway attraction. So a lot of businesses come from Asia, China in particular, have their North American base here in Vancouver to access the North American market, and vice versa. There's a lot of North American activity that comes through Vancouver on its way to Asia. Our port is gigantic, biggest on the west coast of North America. Our tax structure is very competitive, the lowest combined corporate tax rate of any city in the developed world. So it's a very compelling business opportunity. That said, you're right, we're not a head office town. We have attracted entrepreneurs, small and medium-sized enterprises historically. We had headquarters for resource industries, but as those industries became mechanized and smaller, we've shifted into being a service-based economy. Innovation, green economy are what are driving our growth. So we have companies in the creative sectors, digital media, film and television, green buildings, the green economy. That's where our growth is now, a huge amount of job creation in those industries, because people in those industries want to be in a great city like Vancouver. So we've attracted a lot of studios, a lot of branch offices, a lot of entrepreneurs have grown successful businesses here that are attracting investment from all over the world.
One of the areas of the city, and Alan mentioned it and recommended that a lot of you in the audience just walk a little bit to the east here and see Gastown, which is really the historic center of Vancouver, and that's become really a hub for some of the visual effects artists and the digital community. And I know that you would like to see more development in the city when it comes to that, and there are some pockets of opportunity downtown when it comes to redeveloping pieces of real estate that are vacant or underused right now.
Yeah, we're seeing a real boom in office tower development right now. We've got 6 currently being built or in final stages of approval, we've had the biggest surge of commercial and office space construction in decades happening right now. So our downtown, since we changed policy and we're very clear about our downtown business district bylaws, there's a big surge in that. And as well, we have a lot of the smaller businesses in Gastown around the edges of the downtown where it's a little more arts and culture oriented, where it's a little funkier, and a lot of these smaller companies want to be older buildings. But a big piece of it also is we've just approved neighborhood plans, 30-year plans for the West End, which is just west of here, and the downtown east side, which is just east of here, partly because neighborhoods were really concerned about their future and where the towers might be, where we were going to take care of historic buildings and heritage. Their clarity was needed there. So we've just been through a very long and very interesting process to get to those plans and have clarity going forward for the next couple decades in neighborhoods adjacent to downtown.
For those of you who don't know and haven't had a chance to go through it, and it certainly is going to be an interesting experience for you if you do go through the downtown east side. It has a reputation as one of Canada's poorest neighborhoods, and the battle to provide homes for a lot of people who are homeless down there and to deal with what is a fairly obvious drug problem for a lot of people, and mental illness is a challenge. So along with the wonderful things that Vancouver offers, there are challenges that I know your administration has tried to address as well. You mentioned sort of how do you develop some of these older areas, and we have a kind of a unique set of circumstances here surrounded by such beautiful natural beauty that view corridors here are something that people really like to protect.
That's right.
So how do you factor that into when developers come to you with a plan for a high rise? Even if it does solve kind of a housing issue, you want to preserve the natural integrity of this.
Right. We have protected view corridors, view cones through the downtown, primarily on the southern edge of the downtown, looking across at the mountains that have been protected for decades. Council has reaffirmed that protection going forward with standing policy. So we want to make sure that those are public assets, essentially. People love having views as they come down major streets, being able to see mountains or ocean, which is a fairly unique approach. That shapes the growth in downtown and where towers can be. They can't obviously be in those cones, or they can only be up to certain heights in those view corridors. So it's been helpful to shape the growth of the downtown rather than it being willy-nilly. And I think that's going back historically. Vancouverites made great decisions. We protected the watersheds on the North Shore across in these mountains. That's where all our beautiful fresh water comes from. We protected the agricultural land east of us in the Fraser Valley, where a lot of our local food comes from. And we focused our growth in the downtown and in high growth centers throughout the region, which are now connected with primarily rapid transit. So I think it was visionary back in the day. Keeping freeways out of the downtown of Vancouver, I think, was a break from what was happening elsewhere all over North America. These were big decisions that, and view cones being another one that you mentioned, that in their time were really pushing the edges. Now we look back and think, thankfully they did that, and we have a great city as a result.
You mentioned earlier transportation and mass transportation and how that is going to help shape the growth and development of not just Vancouver, but the region. That also presents problems as you and the other mayors in the municipalities around here have highlighted in the last little while. We are already beginning to build the new Evergreen line, but there is another missing link going out to UBC heading west. Mm-hmm. Talk about the unique challenges in this, in the geography of this region, and how all these different separate municipalities with sometimes competing interests need to work together to form a vision.
Well, it is a challenge. We are, so I'm the mayor of the core city, 650,000 or so, 2.5 million people in the region, and expecting another 1.5 million over the coming 30 years. So we're doing a ton of planning as a region to accommodate that population growth without diminishing our quality of life. We don't want to give up being one of the world's most livable cities. In fact, we want to be the greenest city in the world in the process. And this is something that is going to have to happen in cities around the world as urbanization takes place. We're going to have to leapfrog out of the patterns that have created unsustainable growth and unlivable cities in many parts of the world, very, very unhealthy cities to live in. So as a region, we do have goals around our long-term plans that we have agreed to. We had consensus on a regional growth strategy a couple years ago that basically designated the entire region. There's leeway for each of the municipalities to work within that on our land use, but we can't breach the conditions of our regional growth plan without going back to that regional board. And we 30 of us sit on that board, making those decisions and keeping each other accountable. That said, we have real challenges working with the provincial government and the federal government getting funding for the transit system to keep expanding. We need a lot more transit around the region to reduce the growth in cars, which is not sustainable. So we have pressures generally in the region, generally at a local government level, we agree and get along. The challenges come when we need more support from other levels of government for our plans.
I want to talk a little bit about competition, because there are other great cities in the world, as you know. I think people in Vancouver like to think that we're, in the top 5, and a lot of lists, as we talked about in terms of livability, put us there. But for you, when it comes to wooing businesses and wooing the kind of investment that is important to sustain the economy of a city, who do you look at as our primary competition? Who are we competing with?
It's interesting. Cities don't compete directly. We all steal each other's ideas. I think we all keep an eye on the most interesting advances being made in other cities. That said, everyone's trying to kind of achieve that top bracket of the world's great cities, the New Yorks and Londons and Paris. You see, Tokyo and Shanghai for other reasons as Asian cities that have really come. Sydney, certainly. There are a lot of great cities, and they're all unique. Everyone is presented with different challenges. In Vancouver, I'd say, economically, we compete with cities like London and New York and LA, particularly in technology and innovation. We're now third in the world in digital media. It's a $3+ billion industry here in Vancouver, and there's some friendly competition to attract more investment, more business and studios and job creation in that industry specifically, and all these industries concentrate, they have their clusters in different cities. So, but it moves around depending on the industry. And green jobs, we're one of the leaders in the world as a green job center. And our green building policy at the city is now the greenest in North America. And that's enabled an industry here to be successful, to grow, and then to export their ingenuity to cities in China, for example. So there's a give and take with that.
How are developers responding to some of the regulations or the push to green up the way that buildings are built and composed?
Yeah, my sense is the industry has been a great partner in greening our buildings. It's one of the biggest challenges we face. Vancouver, we're literally right on the ocean, and sea level rise is a huge concern. The last estimate of the cost for infrastructure to deal with sea level rise was $10 billion. That's the ballpark over these next 50 years. Because we're right on it, and we have a river just on the southern boundary of the city, the Fraser River, that presents us those challenges. So we're trying to get our carbon emissions down. We have the lowest carbon emissions in North America, but most of our emissions come from our buildings. So we're pushing hard not only on the new building code and having the greenest building code we can, eventually getting to carbon neutral buildings by 2020. And really, a lot of that work is also happening in Europe. European cities, passive house design, very high efficiency buildings, and healthy buildings at the same time. I'd say the development industry here has been fantastic at realizing this is the future of development. The cost side of it, it's a life cycle analysis game at this point. The finance can be a little bit tougher, but these buildings, particularly as the cost of energy increases, they're going to be more affordable over time. It's at the front end of it. I think we've been phasing it in, and I think it's been accepted by the industry. And thankfully so, because it's enabled the industry in terms of green building architects, designers, and all of the technologies involved to really accelerate and then be able to work in other cities around the world deploying their industry.
This building, obviously, with its green roof, which I'm sure a lot of delegates will take a look at, is a pretty good example. Again, all tied into the Winter Olympics. The buildings that were the Athletes' Village and now a vibrant, very close to urban sort of neighborhood for people, although that project had some challenges as well, is another example of how you can build buildings with LEED standards in mind. Talk a little bit about that project maybe and how that fits into the greening of the city.
Right. Well, both this project is LEED Platinum, and the Olympic Village is a LEED Platinum neighborhood. So they were really at the top of the game when they were completed, and we're seeing the competition increase around the world. We're seeing LEED Platinum and carbon neutral and living buildings. We're seeing the state of that art advance by the week, literally. These buildings, I think, advanced dramatically Vancouver's know-how on that front. And these were larger scale. The Olympic Village, I think this one came in around 900 million. The Olympic Village, 1.2 billion roughly. So there's significant scale to deploy at LEED Platinum. We have those standards. LEED Gold certification is required for rezoning, large rezonings in Vancouver. And we also have energy points that we are pushing for as well, because the LEED system, while it is very effective on a number of levels, the energy equation isn't quite what works here in Vancouver in our climate. So we're pushing to advance that, and also looking aggressively at neighborhood energy utilities, district energy, using renewable energy to heat and cool buildings and neighborhoods now. So we've got a number of those systems that are in process. One that's done that basically takes care of the Olympic Village neighborhood. It takes the heat out of the sewer system and turns it into hot water. But we're looking at that being deployed throughout the city over time, so that our local energy needs are managed here and they're low carbon.
We'll talk a little bit more about the future and what's coming down the pike for Vancouver, but we wanted to open it up as well. If there's anybody in the audience, anybody out there who had a question for the mayor, we have microphones out there somewhere, I think, with the ULI insignia on it. If you're into joining the conversation, we invite you to come on up to the mic and ask away. I'll just maybe get Alan or somebody to give me a wave, because it's hard to tell if anybody actually gets up to the microphone. But you have that option as well to join the conversation. We'll keep it going here as well, Mayor, because if you do walk around, you will see the remnant, I guess, and it's a very interesting one architecturally and in terms of transportation, a relic of an older way of thinking, and that's the viaducts. And you'll see those as two main entrances to the downtown core on the east side of the downtown core that at one time was the plan to connect those to a freeway that the people of Vancouver decided they did not want. And what to do about those viaducts and the development of the area that would be vacated if those were torn down is something that could be exciting for developers and also contentious for people who live in those neighborhoods. So where are we at with figuring out what's going to happen with the viaducts, and what do you envision for those areas?
Oh, it's been an interesting process. We've had several years now. Well, there's a history, obviously, of people, those neighborhoods stopping the freeway from coming in. The viaducts got built, but the rest of the freeway did not. It was a kitchen table rebellion in Chinatown and Strathcona and the Grandview Woodlands neighborhoods, mostly ethnic neighborhoods at the time. Now, ethnic means all of us. At the time, they were stopped. The viaducts actually wiped out what was the African-Canadian neighborhood. The black neighborhood called Hogan's Alley is no more. And actually, we've been celebrating the history there this year during Black History Month. So there is a desire to see this turn around. We've looked at a number of other cities around the world who have taken out viaducts or elevated freeways through their cities. Some of them on the waterfront. Certainly Seattle and San Francisco have been grappling with this. Toronto is the Gardiner Expressway. There's a lot of examples of approaches to dealing with this. And in Vancouver, we're in a multi-year study of how we would do it, what the puts and takes are, and ultimately what the bottom line is. What does this achieve? There's definitely a lot of park and potential housing that can be created where the viaducts sit now, and the transportation issues, which were flagged as the primary concern, that you wouldn't be able to get people in and out from the east side as readily, and you'd have goods movement affected. That has largely been dealt with in terms of the transportation planning, that a street level network would achieve a reasonable amount of efficiency, and we'd gain all of this land adjacent to our downtown. So there's still work to do on a number of the elements to see if it is the right decision. There's still work to do negotiating with some of the landowners in the province of BC who are responsible for the soils that sit under there on what was contaminated industrial land. So there's a number of different factors still. We're expecting next year that all of that final round of study will come back for the next council. It's after the next election. They'll need to make a decision on a go or no go with deconstruction of the viaducts, or keep them there and do something more interesting underneath them.
All right. I think we do have a question. Go right ahead.
Yeah. Thank you, Mayor Robertson. That was really interesting. My name's Sarah Fiorito, and I live in the city here and work on some different active transportation projects. And I'm just curious about sort of what your opinion is on, I know that council has made a lot of, advancements in terms of, promoting sort of green lifestyle habits and things like that, but sometimes the public isn't necessarily supportive for whatever reason. Maybe there's lack of information about the economic sort of efficiencies that come from investments in active transportation infrastructure, things like that. And I'm just curious, what sort of your ideas are about how to kind of build the connection between the public and really build support for certain investments that maybe people aren't supportive of currently. So for example, investments in cycling infrastructure, or whatever else?
Public relations, Mayor.
Yeah, it's a really good question. I mean, Vancouver's got a lot of green ethic. We are a city has attracted many people from around the world because it's a beautiful place and they want to live here and take care of this beautiful place. So I think we're at the green end of the spectrum as a city. The population here generally supports initiatives to be more sustainable for many, many years, generations here. So that said, when it comes down to putting in a bike lane, when it comes down to having the greenest building code and the challenges associated with those decisions, it's you have to work through those initiatives one by one and continue to reinforce that overall this is the right investment for the longer term in particular, but even in the short term we're seeing people shift out of their cars to active transportation and transit now for over 20 years, about a 1% a year shift, which is a significant mode shift. We're now at 44% who are not in cars getting around the core of the city of Vancouver, and goal being 50%, that we get a majority of people using transit, walking, and biking. We have to have the appropriate infrastructure to do that. And people are making the choices themselves, even with infrastructure that's not as safe as it should be. We need to keep improving walking and cycling infrastructure and investing in more transit. So as people make that choice, and certainly we saw a big spike of that during the Olympics and people discovering a better way to get around, then the infrastructure is safe and it supports those lifestyle choices. And I think the same thing with dense growth in our downtown and transit-oriented development. People want to live close to transit, particularly rapid transit. You look at the market, and the market is reinforcing that. So we're seeing people actually make those informed decisions for themselves to green their lifestyle. It's really about staying even with that. I wouldn't say we've been that far ahead politically. We are definitely supported by a significant percentage of the population that knows we need to green our city, and they want to make better choices, but they need the infrastructure, they need the options to do that.
Anyone else over at this mic here?
Yes, Mayor Robertson, Glenn Sibley from Denver. You chose form-based zoning for your edge of the city neighborhoods. Why did you choose that, and how's it going?
Sorry, I missed the first part of your...
Form-based? Did you say form-based?
You chose form-based zoning for the edges of your city?
Form-based zoning for the edges. Are you talking about sort of the waterfront?
The adjacent neighborhoods to downtown.
And when you say form-based zoning, that sounds like maybe that's familiar to ULI members, but that's not a term we use in Vancouver.
Well, I thought you had chosen that form of zoning when you rezoned your...
Which form are you referring to?
Well, obviously I've got my facts wrong.
Well, maybe there is something there that we can dig a little bit deeper into about the kind of care and attention you give to what can be built on the periphery of Vancouver. What kind of zoning requirements preserve the historical integrity of the city?
There's a couple things. So downtown the goal is being to densify significally, and in the downtown core, tower and podium form is what predominates and has been, I think, very successful in Yaletown and Cole Harbour next door to us here, so that the street level is human scale, and there are townhomes and retail at street level, but there's a lot of tower, and people love living in towers for the views. Around the outside of the core, there's a very strong sentiment that we protect the character of existing neighborhoods, and we have a lot of single-family home neighborhoods around the city that nobody wants to mess with, frankly. The arterials that go through those neighborhoods are where we are densifying. It's transit-oriented development. We're looking at going 4 and 6 stories with more affordable housing now to densify in those corridors, because people want to stay, they want to age in their communities. Youngsters want to be able to stay and live and work in Vancouver when they grow up here. But the single-family home neighborhoods are really expensive, and it's a limited option for Vancouver's locals. So we're looking at a lot more density in the corridors, retaining the character. Heritage is something, we're a young city, but people are passionate about protecting the heritage buildings that we do have. And that is a big concern of the cities as well as we go forward. But it's a real mix from the heritage buildings we protect to the brand new sparkling towers downtown. We have a really wide range, and I'd say we do have a wide range of forms. Other than we don't have a lot in between the towers and the single-family homes. There's a lot of three-story walk-up apartment buildings. There's not a lot of stacked townhouse, or townhouse for that matter, compared to many other cities. So we're missing some of those intermediate forms, which can be quite dense, but have not been the practice here in Vancouver, and we're pursuing more of those now.
Thank you.
I hope that helps.
Yes.
Right here.
Good afternoon, Mayor Robertson and Chris. Thank you for your presentation. I'm Chris Laturner of MXD Development, based here in Vancouver. Grew up here, and I've seen it change over the years. And just want to welcome all the delegates. But I wanted to talk about elaborating on the Pacific Asia Gateway. Every great city has a great airport, and the role of Vancouver International Airport, called YVR, is the nickname, and the Canada Line, how this has created the seamless connectivity, all the flight routes that occur to Asia, the US, and Europe. And what has been the economic impact in terms of diversification, the businesses you mentioned before, and any sound bites of the dollar figures you could share with the crowd?
Well, I think our airport Canada Line connection has been a fantastic addition for the city. Our airport has been voted best airport in the world for a number of years now. I think we're 5 years in a row, and I hope many of you got a chance to see the collection of art, local art, and the art of the Northwest Coast. Here we are on the territory of the Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh First Nations, and very proud of that Indigenous presence and connection. And I think our airport does a great job of showcasing the extraordinary work that is done on this coast in the arts. It is an important business connection. There's no doubt that Vancouver is basically on the flight path from China and most of Asia to the rest of North America. And while there have been challenges with the federal government's restrictions and support for Air Canada, but not enabling a lot of other carriers to come through here, that's held us back some. But that said, we have a lot of commerce that flows through Vancouver as a Pacific Gateway. And not only the port, but the airport are really the key players on that front. And that, I think, enables, with a good connection downtown directly from the airport, the Cambie Corridor, which the Canada Line subway runs underneath, is now where we're focusing a lot of growth and development, some mixed use, a lot of residential, but we're going to see a lot of interest in the commercial development along there, because in terms of the business flow, it's really easy in and out from the airport for people moving through. And I think that's going to be part of the successful formula with the growth of the Cambie Corridor and the Canada Line that supports it.
Thank you.
For those delegates who are not taking the Canada Line back to the airport, it's a fascinating drive south on Cambie out of the downtown core all the way out to the airport, especially if you're interested in the kind of development that's happening along those transportation corridors, to see the change that's coming in those single-story ranchers all along Cambie that have been sold en masse, and with development happening apace along there too. So it'll be interesting to see how that area develops, especially considering I live in that area as well, but I'm sure it's going to be just fine. All right, another question over there.
Yeah, Bomani Howes. I'm from Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania.
Welcome.
We too are one of the world's most livable cities. We also experienced somewhat of the history that you all experienced with transportation-oriented development, ripping through historic African-American neighborhoods and displacing thousands of businesses and residents. And so across the country, we're dealing with how do you rebuild the urban core, and also at the same time rebuild opportunities to fill in the gaps of wealth disparities. So I found it interesting that you mentioned about the indigenous populations and the African American population here. And usually those efforts to deal with that past are through the arts, honoring the history and legacy. But I'm wondering what your thoughts about how corporate, government, and philanthropic entities can do more collaboratively to fill the wealth gap divide.
Well, that's a big, challenging question. A really good question. Thanks for that. And congratulations to Pittsburgh and being in the top 5 of world's most adaptable cities. So that it came out this week. I think you guys were number 5 and we were number 2. I don't know how Toronto beat us, but.
Yeah, how did Toronto get on that?
But important sustainability, adaptability is absolutely core. So really good points. So we've had an extended process, 3+ years in the downtown east side, just east of downtown here, which is, as Chris said, one of the lowest income neighborhoods in Canada. It's also the highest percentage of artists per capita in Canada. So a very vibrant neighborhood, but thousands and thousands of people living in poverty and challenged with, on many fronts, very high indigenous population. There's a bunch of programs that the federal government runs for native housing for Aboriginal people that are relatively successful, but it's not enough. The homeless population is disproportionately Aboriginal people, and we have now a next phase of opportunity in this neighborhood to the east of us here to ensure that we protect the low-income community there. Most cities have pushed out the low-income community. It's not in the core anymore, and we want to be sure that the people who live in that neighborhood have the opportunity to stay and live a better life. And it's not going to be easy. We took a few I think bold steps in terms of making a rental-only district that going forward there will be no condo residential development. It'll be a mix of commercial business and rental housing, and we're going to try and get as much what we call social housing, affordable housing that's subsidized in the neighborhood, particularly to be sure that the Aboriginal community, indigenous to this to the neighborhood, that they have an opportunity to live and thrive in the neighborhood. So that's going to require some really creative partnerships between governments and corporate and community organizations, native housing organizations. I don't underestimate the challenge of that. I think it'll be difficult, but we've created the opportunity to do that, and we had criticism on all fronts related to that, but I think we've got to give it a chance to succeed. We have to prevent that land from speculation and being out of reach forever being affordable housing for the people who currently live there.
And so for the second part of the question, if that deals with the affordable housing, that deals with the displacement issue. But can you speak to the wealth gap divide?
Yeah,
and what efforts can be done to build more entrepreneurial activity for those populations?
Yeah, that's a much bigger fish to fry. We've obviously got a lot of focus on economic development in the city and creating more green jobs. I know there's been lots of efforts to connect the green jobs, which are growing disproportionately higher than other industries, several times faster in Vancouver than other industries with job growth. We want to connect those to low-income neighborhoods, and we're having some success, particularly with urban agriculture jobs and with zero waste initiatives, recycling, composting. We've created a lot of jobs. A lot of them are part-time jobs, but they work for people who are, trying to find their way up back into the workforce. So creating more opportunities like that in the economy of the city is one piece of it. And then, the housing, creating more affordable housing is a huge challenge in Vancouver. We're one of the most expensive cities in North America, if not the world, and we always have a challenge in trying to get more affordable housing built. And that's finding subsidies with other levels of government, trying to make city land available for more creative projects, and then to be able to connect the dots with worker training programs, with the education piece, and with the jobs that are being created as we make our economy more sustainable here.
Thank you very much, and go Steelers. As long as they're not playing our Seattle Seahawks, you're solid. We might have time maybe for one more question. Is there a gentleman here? Okay, maybe one from here and one from there, and then we'll wrap it up. Go ahead, sir.
Mr. Mayor, I'm from Boston. My name is Don Shafaro, and I want to commend you on your wonderful city and the fact that you celebrate diversity. It's a spectacular place to walk around and to talk to people. We can't lay claim to having the most livable city because we've just come off a terrible winter. So most people want to move here or move to Florida, but we're a lovable city.
Absolutely.
And we're an old city that is now facing the need to do some of the things that you do in terms of increasing the density of the population for all the obvious reasons. I have two questions. One is, when you talk about density and you talk about height, other than view corridors, what are the other subjects that get debated as it has to do with height of buildings? And the second question, you have a city where people want to live in it, people of all sorts of income ranges. The debate in all cities today is how do you create affordable housing? And so what are the things that you're doing to make places for the young people and sort of average people and lower income people to live in a city and create the diversity and the richness that a great city needs to have?
So yeah. Two-parter. One, other than view corridors, what dictates sort of, I guess, how high buildings can be built,
Right.
and how we do that, and then the other points. You want to start with that one?
Yeah. Height. Even though we have a lot of tall buildings here downtown, height is a real concern, and particularly in neighborhoods outside of the downtown, there's a lot of sensitivity. But even within the downtown, we've had, not in the core downtown, but when you get to the west end of Vancouver, there have been quite heated debates about towers. So the tower form, in some places, is still not controversial, some of the downtown neighborhoods, but I'd say outside of the downtown it is very controversial, and there's a kind of constant call for more low to mid-rise, and so we're very careful where tower development happens. We actually had a neighborhood plan in the east side, Grandview Woodlands neighborhood, at the busiest transit station in the province of BC, where the planners at City Hall thought this is a place where there should be towers. We should have density here, transit-oriented development, by best practice. That was not what the neighborhood had said during the planning process, and they were very clearly voicing their concern about that as soon as the concept came out that there be towers at Commercial and Broadway. And we said, back to the drawing board, let's actually get the neighborhood together, put a citizens' assembly, a representative of the neighborhood together, and figure out what kind of density makes sense there. So we take a number of different routes to figure out if height is, first of all, if the zoning is amenable to it. The neighborhood receptivity is really important with that, and there aren't that many places in the city where we will put a tower at this point outside of downtown. Your other issue is a huge concern. We've had a lot of young people leaving because they can't afford to stay in the city. We have people aging in neighborhoods and then unable to stay in that particular neighborhood because there isn't affordable housing for them once they leave their home or apartment. So we are really looking at how we create more density in every neighborhood around the city to enable people to stay in their neighborhood and keep it affordable. And really the focus is on rental housing. More than half of the city rents. We're on the high side for that of a city in North America. We just can't afford, many people can't afford to buy homes because of the cost of land in Vancouver. So our focus has been on getting rental housing construction going, and we've got a real boom on that for a couple of years now, which is going to help, but we're going to have a sustained effort to build rental housing and to start figuring out how we get affordable home ownership options on the table. We have a lot of co-ops in Vancouver that were created in the 70s and 80s, and those programs disappeared. They've created a lot of good affordable housing around the city, but we don't have a new model for that. So we're looking at those kind of new models for co-ops, affordable home ownership for people that want to build some equity and not just be paying rent. So those are really tough questions. I've had a task force grappling with this. We've got a number of pilot projects and different aspects of it, but it will be one of the city's great challenges going forward, given the limited land space.
And good luck to your city in Boston too, one of the great cities in North America.
Thanks for taking that Stanley Cup from us a couple of years ago.
I still remember being there to cover that, and in a local pub on the south side, the guy's like, "Oh, you're from Vancouver? Why don't you go choke on a Nanaimo bar?" And if you spend enough time in Vancouver, you'll eventually learn what a Nanaimo bar is. But great people, no doubt. Final question from that microphone over there, young lady.
Hi, thank you. Kate Brown from Grosvenor. Mayor, you mentioned our resiliency research, which the city comes up really well in second, but clearly one of the key risks is sea level rise, which you alluded to in your address. You mentioned a cost of $10 billion, and I was just interested if you could elaborate of how you've arrived at that figure, and then also what the city is doing to reduce that vulnerability to sea level rise, but also anticipating that you won't be able to avoid all the effects. What are you doing to really prepare the city and the residents and the management systems for the effects of sea level rise?
Well, another challenging arena for us. So there was this big study done last year on the infrastructure costs of projected sea level rise, and that 10 billion figure was the ballpark that they came back with. And Vancouver has a fair bit of sea level real estate, primarily to the south of us along the Fraser River, which is a big wild river and is not a dammed river. We don't control the flow of that river, and 100 years ago, that river had the city of Richmond, where the airport is, was 6 feet underwater. So that's a constant threat. It hasn't happened, a big flood hasn't happened for 60 years now. I think 44 was the last one, 48. So the sea level rise for us, right now we're in a process of dealing with what we call our flood control levels, so the height above sea level that buildings need to be built at. And we have raised that up. We are looking at going higher now based on the science. And there's a lot of work, I think, globally looking at, well, what do we prepare for, given the lifespan of buildings and infrastructure, based on the projections of IPCC and the best science that's out there. It's a very difficult call. And obviously it's better to be safer than sorry. That said, the cost associated with raising entire neighborhoods that are close to sea level up is significant. So we're in a process of that now, gathering the best advice that we can to make the next adjustment to our flood control levels and dealing with sea level rise. Most of the work will probably have to be done with barriers and keeping the ocean out from the low-lying areas. And obviously lots to learn from the Dutch on that front.
Right.
Hard to imagine we're ever anywhere close to that, but to protect a lot of the sea level land in Vancouver, there's going to have to be massive expense. And that's why we have to connect the dots to our focus on being the greenest city and reducing our emissions, working with other cities around the world to eliminate our dependence on fossil fuels. Ultimately, that's where we have to go to deal with climate change and the ocean rising here and the floods that affect us coming downriver.
We do all of that as we also are told on a fairly constant basis that the big one is coming, so seismic considerations as well.
That's right.
But let's not think about that. Let's go out in a few moments and enjoy the sunshine and really love what it is about Vancouver that makes it special, and that is the out of doors. I want to thank you, Mayor Robertson. Thanks very much for being a part of this.
Chris. Thanks everyone. Enjoy your time here.
Thank you all.